In the world's largest democratic exercise, India's 900 million registered voters will cast the ballots in national elections between April the 11th and May the 19th. 5 years on from his first victory, Prime Minister Narendra Modi wants a fresh mandate to continue his mission to transform India. But the main opposition Congress party says he's failed in key areas. So how has this government matched up to its promises? And who will stand out to shape India's future? To discuss these issues and more, I'm very happy to be joined by Ye Hailin from the China Academy of Social Sciences and Atu Aneja, Associate Editor of The Hindu. That's our topic. This is a dialogue. I'm Yang Ray. Welcome to our discussion here. Atu, every 5 years is an opportunity for Indians to examine the performance of your Prime Minister. How do you rate his track record over the past 5 years?
Yeah, it's a mixed track record. Narendra Modi came with a lot of expectations because he, in a way, had promised to reindustrialize India, and from a IT and a services kind of an economy into a manufacturing economy, and which would in turn create millions of jobs, because that is something which the crying need for, especially for the young India, which is below the age of 30, 70% below the age of 30. He also promised that India would become from an emerging economy, it will become one of the major powers in the world. In a way, that was the message which came. So he came with inflated, I thought, projections of what he would achieve. And at the end of 5 years, we find that on the economic front, I think he's not done as well as he had promised. In fact, far short of the expectations. But in other areas, such as security, etc., in terms of perception, he has won the perceptions war hands down. So the figures may not show that Narendra Modi has matched up to what he had promised, but in terms of perception, I think he's still rated as probably the foremost leader of the current era.
Hailin, it's not surprising that more and more Chinese start to follow politics and foreign policy of India for reasons you and me understand very well. So do you think we should take Prime Minister Modi more seriously despite the alleged underperformance of the Indian economy?
I think we should take the Prime Minister Modi even more seriously than 5 years before, because now it's a critical, even difficult moment for Modi. So it's a test for BJP how this party can run this country smoothly, even reach its target. So currently, it's not only a test for Prime Minister Modi, it's the test for whole BJP, even also if we're considering the diplomatic issue, it's also a test for China and India, how these two Asia giants can run in the future, can run their relationship in the future, because usually we get used to handle or address a strong political party in India, such as BJP, or a strong figure such as Prime Minister Modi. But now Modi faces the difficulties. We probably will see a weaker government, a coalition government, or the weaker premier. So it's not only the test for India, it's also a test for China. We had to think the things more comprehensively, because we had to think the local party, the mass media, the business community, and all the figures we should put into the consideration. Not only we listen to the opinion of Prime Minister Modi, it's not enough.
When we look at a competition, whatever kinds of a competition, we have a Chinese saying, it's not that I'm bad, it's that my opponent is very good. Therefore, let me ask a question about his opponent, Rahul Gandhi, yet another major presidential hopeful, Prime Minister hopeful.
Well, Rahul Gandhi is a work in progress. A few years ago, in fact 2-3 years ago, he was, in fact, became a figure of ridicule in the political circles, including Prime Minister Modi, especially when he was campaigning in the earlier, before 2014. So that phase is over. Rahul Gandhi is considered as a serious, young, upcoming leader. And that has changed. So he is now, the way he conducts himself, his grip on issues has improved markedly from what it was in the past. So he is a work in progress, and I suspect he's only going to improve as the years pass.
In what areas do you think Rahul Gandhi would appeal more to the mind and heart of the electorate?
Well, he comes across a person for the downtrodden. He he is a person who communicates for the masses.
Is that the mantra, the mandate of the the Congress Party from day one of its beginning?
It was from the day one, but it has got enhanced because the BJP under Modi has been accused of becoming a plutocracy from a democracy, in the sense that the party is, or Mr. Modi personally seems to be connected with top businessmen. There are scandals like the Rafale deal, which is a military aircraft deal, where he's supposed to have favored a major Indian industrialist. So that perception that the BJP under Modi is for the rich has been contrasted dramatically by the Congress party, that look, we are the people who are for the poor, and we are also for an inclusive India, because the Congress is targeting the BJP for its social divisiveness, that it is basically a majoritarian party, that's a party mainly for the Hindus, and does not include the diversity of people in India. So those are the messages which are coming from the Congress in their manifesto, which has recently been done. Rahul Gandhi talks about that we are in a position for a final assault against poverty, and that is there in the Congress manifesto very strongly, and he's talked about that the minimum income for an Indian has to be 12,000 rupees, which comes to 1,200 yuan a month. So which is, it's been spelled out, and the maths for that seems to have been done. So he's contrasting himself for a man for the masses. But is the message going through? That is a problem. Because of late we see that the Modi campaign has shifted gears from bread and butter issues. It's moved to security issues, and this has happened especially after the February 12th Pulwama attack. So the narrative from the BJP has shifted dramatically, and that seems to have favored the BJP and Prime Minister Modi substantially, because that is what the surveys which have come recently are showing, that his popularity seems to have taken a big surge after February 14th.
It seems the populist leader would always use the excuse of national security to arouse sympathy and support from the power base of either BJP or the Congress Party. However, do you think we can use a discourse like Republicans as opposed to Democrats in the United States to liken the political roadmap of BJP and the Congress Party, with BJP representing Republicans that favor the rich and Democrats the poor?
I think it's not very accurate, because India has a very strong local party, not like in the United States. The United States only two major parties. But India, in a lot of the Pradesh, actually it's a local party run the major politics activities. So had to put it into the consideration. And also, I think now there's a perception that the BJP is a pro-rich people. But we should remember that the Congress Party, most of the elites, they are the rich people. So it's not only like the rich and poor. I think this is because of the expectation and the perception, because when the Modi take into power, the people has a high expectation on him, not including the rich guy and the poor guys. But now the poor guys think that their life didn't change much better. So they have some different opinion towards the Prime Minister Modi. It's not because of the Modi is a pro the rich guy, it's because of they are still suffering from the poor status. So I think it's because of the people has disappointed on the BJP's policy, not only there's a pro-rich guy or not. Every party want to accelerate the economic growth. They have to pro the investment and the finance resources. That means they have to pro-rich guy.
No politicians would seriously ignore the demands of the rank and file in major campaigns, with the elections around the corner too. Do you think the charisma of Prime Minister Modi could live up to the institutional support? I mean, the popularity of his personality is one thing. What about the institutions? I mean, this is a broad picture, you know what I mean. Let's look at the track record of his reform. He vows to transform India. And what about the idea of India? Has he been able halfway through in transforming your country?
Well, there are two elements of it. One is the concrete economic policies which were put into place by Modi after he came into power, which was essentially Make in India, for example. That was a campaign on which to industrialize India through domestic mobilization of domestic capital as well as foreign capital. Now, unfortunately, that has not delivered to the extent it was promised. Second thing was infrastructure development. If India is to grow from 7% or 8% to 10%, then we need a much better quality of roads, rails, ports, airports, And that was a promise on which Prime Minister Modi had campaigned hard. Now that unfortunately has also not come to the level it should. When we come to unemployment figures, in fact, we probably have record unemployment right now during the last 5 years. So that is the economic side of it. Then there is the perception side of it, because Prime Minister Modi has changed the perception completely after the Pulwama attack, that he is a boat leader. Once the killing of the soldiers took place in Kashmir, he was the one who ordered the airstrikes in Pakistan.
He came across as a father figure on the ruins of a war, somehow, quote unquote.
He took full advantage of an incident.
It's very much like what President Bush did in the aftermath of 9/11. But of course, our Pakistani friends would be angry with me because it cannot be compared to 9/11.
Surely, each side has unique circumstances, but the security narrative has come into play big time. So, whatever may be the feelings on the economic front, they seem to have been compensated in a way by securitization of the election campaign. I think that is something which he has gained. Third thing, I think, is a perception war. The BJP has been better, I think, than the Congress when it comes to use of social media, for example, in terms of messaging, when it comes to that, use of the media, television channels, in a very coherent manner. I think that's, again, in terms of sending the message across, the BJP and Modi has been much better than Rahul. My final point, that Modi has tried to create an idea of Indian exceptionalism. And that you can see in the way of Balakot strikes, or strike on the Balakot camp, that, you know, we as Indians are capable of this. We are exceptional people, which is also feeding into his narrative of civilizational rise of India, that we are an ancient civilization, and under me, this ancient civilization reviving in the modern era. So Indian exceptionalism, revival of, those are the kind of messages which Modi, through his very slick media campaigns and use of social media, has managed to convey. So despite all the economic problems, I think the view which is emerging is, okay, we know this man has made mistakes, but let us give him another chance. So I think that's where he's likely to edge out the Congress.
Yes, Narendra Modi is a front runner at this moment. But what do you think of the chance for him to win the second term?
I think he will win the second term, but the BJP will face a lot of problems. Actually, last December I was in New Delhi. I noticed that a lot of young people still have the very high expectation on Prime Minister Modi himself, but a little bit disappointed on the BJP. Just like the people say that the BJP is too pro the rich guy, but barely nobody talk about it. Nobody said that the Premier Modi is too pro the rich guy. There's a difference.
Haileen answered my question about whether the institutions would support his charisma or popularity. The BJP seems to have failed people's expectations about the personality of Modi. Just go ahead.
Actually, Modi, I think that means in the last December, actually, the BJP just suffered from the massive failure on the local election. 5 Pradesh all lost. So at that time, I think that people has a lot of the different opinion on whether Modi should run a second term. But I think during this general election, Modi is the only choice for BJP supporters. So I think Modi will have the chance to run the second term, but will be a lesser majority, not the majority, or even the minority. Will be the BJP will be the leading party, but not the dominating one.
Well, when you look at the chance for a strong man to prevail, you have to draw a comparison between different kinds of strongman leadership, like Erdogan in Turkey, Putin in Russia, Prime Minister Modi in India, and President Trump in the United States. They could all be called strongman politics. So if you may generalize and characterize strongman politics in individual cases like India, what would you say to our audiences?
Well, it is a very Indianized form of personality. I would not say personality cult, but it's almost coming to that the individual is more important than the institutions. And he has usurped, and that he is the person who will deliver India. So it's a complete change of paradigm, where you are no longer talking about performances and institutions, but perceptions and a savior in a way. to take that forward.
Is that also the role that the social media plays in shaping the strongman image of Prime Minister
I think
Modi?
specifically in India, Youngre, because what Modi has dug into is the demographics of India. He has seen this young, impatient India of 70% under 30, very tech-savvy, very close to the internet and that generation. So he's tailored his messages very cleverly, which aligns with the hopes and aspirations of a young and impatient India, which not necessarily is familiar with the history of India, or the rise of India from the freedom struggle onwards and the travails and challenges which it has faced. It is a time of instant noodles and instant coffee. That, okay, if you feel this guy is going to deliver, we'll go for it. So somehow politics has been dumbed down in India in a big way.
Well, you have to look at facts and figures. For example, of unemployment, young people need to have bread and butter. They need to have jobs. If you only look at the appealing, glossy image of the Prime Minister, I mean, gradually young people develop a very cynical sentiment.
Absolutely, I agree. And this was the case which was happening before Pulwama. When you saw the youth unemployment had risen, so that was, and the figures, the surveys were showing the popularity is going down. And remember, in the state, in the provincial elections, the BJP had lost 3 major provinces. But the dynamic, therefore, had to be changed from that. And I think that's where the people are, or maybe the majority may still be able to back him for a second term.
If you review
But
history,
in the long run, in the long term, this is going to be a problem because facts and figures will come up and there will be questions asked.
Gentlemen, if you look at the history, either during the Cold War or after, you could probably compare the turning point of the political fortune of Prime Minister Modi with what happened in the early 1980s when Lady Thatcher used the Falkland Islands to turn his political career for the better, because his popularity was plummeting. And then it's Falkland Islands and the narrow success had saved his political fortune. Do you think it's also the case with President Bush in the wake of 9/11? Similar cases and examples could be easily raised to illustrate the factor of luck. And the luck played a powerful role in shaping the future.
In my opinion, is that the accident or the confrontation between India and Pakistan on the Kashmir areas is not big as enough to compare with Falkland Island or September 11. It's still only the conflicts between 2 neighbors, and actually it's fully controlled, no matter measuring by the weapon system
I'm
they're
afraid
using.
in the specific context of India, where media is so nationalistic,
But we should
people's
remember,
sentiments could be easily set ablaze.
but we should remember that in Falkland Island actually is already 100 years, longer than 100 years, Britain and Argentina keeping the peace relationship. And in September 11, actually, there's also it's an outrage and outbreak accident. But for the accident between the India and Pakistan, it's happened every year for many times.
Far-fetched, clumsy comparison. I apologize. But what do you think of the issue of women? I mean, social status of women in India remains a chronic issue. The construction of toilets, as Prime Minister Modi said in the first inaugural speech, may also fell short of general public's expectations. But how serious is this issue for women to have equal access to education and job opportunities?
Constitutionally and technically there isn't, but in practical, statistics show that the status of women is not really comparable in terms of employment data, for example, data in terms of ownership, let's say, of credit cards, or in terms of rising to positions of influence in the corporate sector, or even in politics. So despite Indira Gandhi being a woman, but that's an exception. So women's issue generally, and women's security is a major issue. And I think these
Sonia Gandhi is also a powerful figure, iconic figure for Indian women.
Yes.
In South Asia, women are always featured prominently in their individual family politics and political roadmap. So do you think women remain an embarrassing vulnerability for the Indian democracy?
You mentioned a very key point, was that family politics. Actually, they are the women, but they are not only the women. They are the son, they are the daughter or mother of somebody. It's because they came from a very strong families. It's not because of they just are women.
And also they come from the very upper layer of the caste system.
Very high, actually.
What's the name of the highest caste?
That's
Solomon?
no,
Parliament, yes.
They are the highest rank of the social orders. So
therefore, my follow-up question is very much about what can be done to improve the long-existing inequality of the caste system. Income polarization, social polarization has long remained a very embarrassing problem for the Indian democracy.
Well, there was a policy of reservation or positive discrimination, you can call it that day. There were reservations kept for the lower castes, especially in government jobs. In fact, right even up to now, nearly 60% of the government jobs are reserved for the disadvantaged. So there's been a very cautious policy of positive discrimination which has been followed right from the independence.
Despite the Indian equivalent of the Affirmative Act, what do you think of the skills and job opportunities, education opportunities of the lower caste?
Well, education in general has been a problem, especially in rural India. Those who have benefited really, let's say post-reform, has still been the middle class. But I think you need a real sea change in terms of changes in the rural areas. I think China did it in the 60s and 70s, and we did not go ahead and do that to the extent we need in terms of providing education, in providing skills, and in terms of changing attitudinally. Because if you have a mobilized population in the rural areas, it will be a demanding population. And that creates the critical mass for the next stage of development, which is of massive manufacturing and agriculture, people from agriculture shifting into industry. So education in general is a problem, but specifically when it comes to certain castes, I think it's even an acuter problem. So that's where Rahul Gandhi's message is coming in, that education and rural areas are my real constituency, because Indian miracle will not rise unless we educate and empower our rural people.
Hailin, in democracies, in theory, voters would have a chance every 5 or 4 or 6 years to seek a leadership change or regime change. But an important fact that may testify to the functions of real democracy is the number of turnout. What about the size of the turnout in India this time around?
I think it's very high.
600 million voters
that's really high. Yeah, that's really high. But the point is that how many people they are really vote based on their own personal willings, or they just receive some financial support from the local parties. This is a long-term phenomenon for India. So that's the key question, is that I think for the general election, the situation is much better. But for the provincial election, the thing is totally different. So I think in my personal opinion is that how the people, the voters, can vote based on their own, the true personal willing. That's also a key issue, not only the number.
These days, too many debates and discussions have been organized to draw a comparison between India and China's roadmap of industrialization or social progress. I mean, this is a very interesting topic for not only people on both sides, India and China alike, but for the rest of the world to follow the hopes and silver lining of emerging markets to change the economic landscape of the world. Here is the chronic issue of democracy. Now, I was told that this largest democratic exercise in India would be a miracle in mankind history. So is it, forgive me for saying that, is it worthwhile to burn money this way, and yet you see a lot of disillusion and disappointment on the side of those who support the Prime Minister, the front runner?
Look, I don't think you can compare the two, because the two systems have evolved because of certain historical processes. And Indian democracy emerged because of its own freedom struggle, and it was a natural progression of that. Whereas China had its own revolution, which made it embark on a different path. So I think it's a wrong question to say as to whether the Chinese model can be replicated in India. It will never be, because these two countries have evolved in their own way. But having said that, China has done spectacularly well, especially after it joined the WTO. Its rise has just gone ahead and it's become the second largest economy in the world. India's done not too badly. We are still an emerging economy. Growth rate is pretty steady, 7 to 8%. And when you talk to the aspirations, the very fact that people come out to vote, and if there's going to be more than 75 to 80% voting, that shows that there's hope in the system.
That's something that amazes China indeed, despite all the drawbacks and the shortcomings concerning a democratic exercise. Hailin, I know it's awkward, it's a little bit sensitive to discuss a comparison between democracy and non-democracy way of running the economy. But in China, do you think what works out, what suits the national conditions would be considered the best therapy? You wouldn't just call, democracy is the universal solution to whatever problems that India both solve.
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think because of China and India has the similar situation that we need to catch up the mainstream of the world economy. So how to reach the target is the key issue rather than in which constitution or institution we can reach our target. The function is more important than the institution. This is my basic comment.
In fact, for a majority of the Chinese observers who follow your political process, it doesn't matter who wins the elections, be it Rahul Gandhi or Prime Minister Modi. It's the Indian phenomenon that captures most of our attention. For example, one of my close friends who works in the Silicon Valley in the United States says, why do most of the Indians become the brilliant CEOs of startup companies, technology companies, and they have put the Chinese Americans to shame? That has a lot to do with the education, with the superiority of speaking English perfectly. But other than these factors, do you think elite education and a legacy of the British colonialism should be, deserve credit for the success of the Indian elite in the United States?
I don't think so at all.
I'd like to have your explanation.
Yeah, I'll tell you why. Because most of the phenomena which takes place in Silicon Valley was a product of institutions and engineering institutes, we call the Indian Institute of Technology, for example, which were created after independence. This was a Nehruvian legacy of creating these top institutes in all sectors, from engineering to medicine. The Indian nuclear program itself was done by Nehru in 1948. The space program starts in the 50s. So Nehru really he laid the foundations for a modern India, and people who came out of the system, when they went abroad and got their opportunities, they flourished. But
whatever the political institutions, culture, nationality in the process of nation making, we look at the people. It's the people, the human factors, that would contribute most to the success story of whatever country. Now, what has impressed you most about the success of the Indians, the people?
I think the Indian people is just like the Chinese people in the 1990s. They are very keen on to accelerate their growth. The people, allow me to say that, they are eager to change their life. That's the most important factors, because they are young, very passionate. I think in any kind of the constitution or institution, you provide the essential condition, the people's energy will be totally born out. So they can reach very high level of the development. It's because they are very young, actually, compared with us.
The young labor force?
I think so.
But that's for the working labor force. I'm talking about the elites.
The elite is still,
top
it needs to be young, not only by age, it's also by mind, by your mindset.
Thank you so much. I keep this question open for our next round of discussions here on the program of dialogue. I promise, because I'm personally so interested in the success of the Indians, not just the system itself. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.